Yeah, Nikki, she would always complain when she was young, you know, we're watching TV or a movie, and I'm always like analyzing and it's always the same response. Can't you just enjoy it? And the answer was always the same. This is pleasurable. Critique is a pleasurable thing. But critique is also purposeful. I belong to a group called Moana, and it's a group of activists, scholars, artists from across the Pacific. All of us are from the Pacific, who came together around this film and critiquing the film. And if you want to know more about it, there's a Facebook page called Moana. We are Moana. Now, the term Moana is a Polynesian term for ocean. And I'm not actually aware of a term like that in Micronesia. Certainly in the vernaculars that I'm familiar with, the more appropriate, and there may be a term, but the more appropriate term for dealing with the water and what's significant about the water is the sea. And more specifically, specific seaways between islands. The unit of analysis is actually very specific, and it's very instrumental. And I hope I have a chance to come back to why it's significant to talk about the Pacific in terms of instrumentality, or the man-made, the human-made, the woman-made worlds that Pacific Islanders created, as opposed to something that was just delivered or some mystical connection. And one of the things that's going to turn out to be key in this analysis is when certain things that are highly technical and instrumental repeatedly get depicted as mystical and otherworldly. When that happens, there's some serious elision or denials or erasures of people's specific histories, especially indigenous technological histories. That would be one of the beefs I have with Moana, especially a film that makes a lot about traditional seafaring as a part of its self-consciously understood benevolent story about the Pacific. But the purpose that I wanted to talk about, it's really a distinct honor for me to kick off the series that is also using this particular term, is that the stakes involved in critiquing Moana, at the end of the day, has to do with how we imagine ourselves as Pacific Islanders, and how we as Pacific Islanders imagine ourselves in ways that are either inclusive or exclusive. And it's important to point out that both inclusiveness and exclusivity can work really nicely, but they can also be seriously violent. When you want to be inclusive, for example, except when your term privileges a very specific, particular group of people that then gets to stand for everybody else, right? There's a violence in that you're making. So for example, when the first trailer that was rolled out with Moana was The Rock, Dwayne Johnson playing Maui, who says, when he first meets Moana the character, Moana is the character, but Moana also means ocean, right? And he says, you don't know who I am? I'm only the most important demigod in all of the Pacific. No, right? Maybe in Polynesia. But most of us outside don't know, don't recognize Maui. Not that there's any problem with that. But the problem with the kind of claim about representing the entire Pacific is, of course, that violence about one part standing for the whole. At the same time, there's a a similar but kind of in reverse kind of elision that I'm going to talk about later. And that's when certain elements of specifically Micronesian seafaring that comes specifically out of the local and regional histories, cultures, and even geographies. How the islands of Micronesia are above the equator, how they run in a so-called east to west axis, helps produce a very particular kind of star compass. Quotation marks around compass for a moment. And how that system and the sharing of that system with Polynesians in the 1970s and 80s that made possible the nothing less than a really magnificent story of revival among Polynesians. But the sharing of that story, when it first started, was recognized as just one part of a system that was hybrid. Noah Thompson, the guy who was responsible for the development of this hybrid system that drew from Micronesia, but also invested heavily in things like planetariums, in archival research, in oral traditions, in modern science, right? That system they coined the term wayfinding, specifically and very explicitly to mark it as a modern hybrid system that drew from these different sources and reached over to Micronesia. When Moana uses the term wayfinding to describe and imagine an ancient system in an island setting that is clearly Polynesia, and not even Polynesia, but a kind of mashup of a Polynesia. A little bit of Tahitian there, a lot of Samoan here, the tattoos, the village, the language that you hear, but then multicultural music from Fiji, villains from the Solomon Islands, right? Actors from New Zealand, a very particular idea about Maui that Tongans don't like, for example. That mashup, when it presents wayfinding in that same term, complete with certain kinds of images that clearly come from Micronesian traditions, when that's presented as an ancient Polynesian thing, right? That constitutes an erasure of distinctly Micronesian technological development. When we started to come out and put our critiques together, we very quickly started to be called haters. And I think the most generous thing I grant to that is there's so much love for Moana that to criticize it is to simply be haters. But that hurts because the purpose for critique is not about hating. Right? I actually love the Pacific. I love the story of Polynesian voyaging. I'm not entirely sure what to make of how it came to be explicitly modern and deferential to knowledge from Micronesia to 40 years later being the model right down to the word for ancient Polynesian navigation. I don't know how that happened, but it isn't out of hate when we point that out and say, you know, one of the problems with Moana here is that it is replicating the same problems of colonialism. And it makes certain broad claims about the region at the expense of specifics. The Pacific, we know, is not one place. It's incredibly diverse. So is Micronesia, and actually, so is something like Chamorro culture. And it doesn't help us when Disney presents a standard for the Pacific that becomes, as we all know, the model for which, if you don't emulate that, if you don't look like that, you must not be a real Pacific Islander. Craig Santos Perez is is a highly acclaimed, highly awarded Chamorro writer. And when the rollouts to the film started to come out, he posted this really, really funny thing. He said, okay, I gotta confess, I'm one of those kinds of Pacific Islanders. As a Chamorro, spent a lot of time in the States, who suffered that disease called Polynesian envy. And all of us know what that's about. But that wasn't the funny part. The funny part was his next line. But having watched the Moana trailer, I'm cured. Let's get started. So, this morning I was really focused on my talk at UOG yesterday that I didn't really spend a lot of time. I just sent the title and the blurb to Nikki a few weeks ago, and I've been working on this. I knew what I'd say, but I didn't have yet the vehicle, the form that I was going to say. And I looked at it and I said, I thought about the length of the title and the jargon, and I thought, it might be a little confusing. So at 3 this morning, I changed it to that. And you might think that academics are long-winded, and you may be right. The reason why academics are long-winded is because we feel like we have to be very precise and very clear, especially around matters that are really, really fraught. Right? When Polynesians start calling me haters, I gotta be really careful. Polynesians are bigger than us, but because it's not true, and I don't want that. I also don't want to pull back on my criticism. It's not hating when, I don't even want to call it defending Micronesia. To me, the stakes are about getting it right. So the long title is actually the whole thesis of the story. A splash of title in the insidiousness of an old colonial idea. A splash is the film. It's a big splash. It's made tons of money. Everybody loves it. The tidal wave is actually, the problem I have is actually not with Disney, though I have problems with the different reasons why other islanders participated in it. Though I get it and I understand it. I think they could have been sharper in preempting certain kinds of things that Disney did. Ultimately, the problem is a tidal wave, that this splash is just a small part. And that tidal wave has to do with an older idea. And it's captured in what the category Polynesia has always stood for in the West. And I'm going to talk about that. So the problem is actually this older idea. It's an old colonial idea. And the problem is how this film continues that old colonial idea into the 21st century and the effects of that idea. The effects, the insidious effects, are the many different forms of colonialism that I think are at work in this cartoon, right, in this film. The Disneyfication of Pacific culture and history has to do with, this is where it gets really hairy. When that old colonial idea, this kind of colonial fantasy projection about what Polynesia means, paradise, noble savage, primitivism, escapism, the noble savage, did I say that right? The problem is when those ideas come together with the power of Disney Imagineering and how Disney works traditionally and its new mode of operation, augmented by Pacific Islanders assisting in. That becomes now a really complex thing. This is where I'm really happy to say that Guam and Micronesia furnishes a really good vantage point to see what's wrong with this. So it's really, I want to talk about all of that in a way that I hope can be followed. So, but it's still a long title, so I changed it to that. What I want to do is offer, there's going to be some parts where I decided to put a long passage and read it because I want to be precise and because it helps time. And I really want to capture it, especially because it starts to get hairy. I want to offer a criticism of Disney's Moana that connects it to larger colonizing forces. Forces that stem from old and deeply entrenched ideas about the Pacific Islands and Pacific peoples as a place of paradise and a people whose exotic and mystical connections to powerful nature have been understood, celebrated, and especially capitalized for their potential to provide respite and even therapy to non-Pacific people suffering the perceived afflictions of modern civilization. A lot of stuff, right? Such views contain principally in Western ideas about Polynesia, the category. Polynesia is a category. It's also a region with people we call Polynesians, but it's also helpful to distinguish between Polynesia, an imagined category from the West, and people who have come to be called Polynesia. In some way, there's no such thing as a Micronesia. That's a category superimposed on this region, right? Well, Polynesia is a special category because it happens to turn out to be the well-trod ground for imagining what the Pacific Islands are. It becomes the standard default. One of the things I'm afraid of is from here on out, Moana becomes the go-to image for the Pacific Islands. That doesn't help any of us. It's just a cartoon. Disney's not just a corporation. Such views contain principally in Western ideas about Polynesia as opposed to actual islanders in the region, and from elsewhere in the Pacific are insidious. Insidious. Lousy effects spread out over a long period so you don't see it. It's especially the insidious aspects of things that are presented as benevolent and loving and positive that we have to be most aware of. They're insidious for many different reasons, but none more so than how they continue to elide actual historical and present-day realities in a Pacific-wide region that is remarkably diverse, even if there are remarkable affinities among its peoples. One of the themes that's going to be playing out across my talk that I think is really important for this term and for how we think about who we are, questions of identity, has to do with the tension between inclusivity and exclusivity, between notions of a we that includes everybody without losing differences, or notions about exclusivity when it's warranted. Right? I want to be really specific and exclusive when I want to talk about just these people and not make a big claim for everybody else. And sometimes we need to be more exclusive. When to be inclusive, when to be exclusive, when it's good to be exclusive, and when it's good to be inclusive, when inclusivity commits a lot of erasures, or when exclusivity commits a lot of erasures. We've got to have a better handle on that. The purpose actually has a lot to do with what Guam's dealing with right now around political status and the recent legal ruling on the that came out of the courts a couple of days ago. When we understand how Moana, advertised by Disney as a culturally authentic and historically accurate, something new is going on here, right? Disney is making a claim about cultural authenticity and historical accuracy. When we understand how they do that, and as it's confirmed by a small group of so-called Pacific cultural experts, and I grant that all of them have strong expertise in their fields, but there's a sleight of hand when they get a Samoan tattoo artist who is not just an artist but goes really deep when you understand the cultural traditions of tatau for Samoans. And you can understand why he wants to be involved, to get that. If Disney's going to put tattoos out there, and he's getting it correct if I can help it, right? But the sleight of hand is when you have these experts in their different fields assuring that there's authenticity, and then the claim is the whole film is authentic. How authentic can it be for a film about the Pacific that has Samoan tattoo, Fijian canoes, erases Micronesian technological knowledge about seafaring? We have all these things that look really authentic and are vouchsafed as authentic by the practitioners in the service of a mashup that gets to stand as historically correct. When we understand how Moana perpetuates these problems as a result of eliding and marginalizing differences as a precondition for achieving this authentic and accurate look and feel, we begin to understand how colonial forces operate in the 21st century through positive and benevolent and loving ideas about culture and identity, as well as through the enthusiastic support of contemporary Pacific Islanders. We're on to new ways that power operates through our, here I'm helping myself to the third person, we, right? Through our complicity.